Hey everyone, how's it going? God Gamer here. In this video, I'm going to be teaching you how to play Hollow Knight multiplayer. So there's a lot of different ways now that you can play Hollow Knight multiplayer. So I'm going to be going over a brief description of each one so that you have an idea of what you might want to try out. First up is HKMP, and this is probably what you think of when you think of Hollow Knight multiplayer. HKMP will communicate the positions and actions of other players to your screen. It can even communicate the positions of those players on your map. HKMP, depending on the server settings, can even allow you to interact with those other players in the form of PvP. In other words, you can fight with other players. It's pretty awesome. Now, what HKMP doesn't do that some people might expect is it doesn't actually communicate the positions of enemies to other players, and it doesn't communicate anything about the state of the world. So in other words, one player can have infected crossroads and the other players might not. And at the same time, one player can have an enemy on one side of the screen and the other player might have the enemy on the other side of the screen. And killing that enemy on one player's screen doesn't kill it for the other players. However, when players attack, it does communicate those attacks to the other players' screens, so you can still hit enemies on other players' screens, but by default, you're not going to know where those other enemies are actually located. HKMP also has add-ons. One of the add-ons will tell you the locations of other players' enemies, and another add-on, for example, Infection Tag, actually creates a whole new game for you to play in multiplayer. The next thing I'm going to talk about is ItemSync and Multiworld. So with these mods, all the players will connect to a server. And with ItemSync, when one player picks up an item on that server, all other players get sent that item as well. With Multiworld, when one player picks up an item, one other player gets that item. ItemSync can work with vanilla item placements as well, but typically you'd play ItemSync or Multiworld with randomized items. Archipelago is another mod that's a multi-world randomizer, but instead of all the players playing Hollow Knight, some players might be playing Hollow Knight and other players will be playing different games. So some players might be playing A Link to the Past or Super Metroid and sending Hollow Knight items to your game. And the last thing is using Nucleus Co-op to play Hollow Knight in split screen. Now, I'm only going to be covering the first two things, which are HKMP and ItemSync/Multiworld. If you want to learn how to try Archipelago or Nucleus Co-op, I'm going to have links in the description with guides. However, I have no experience with those myself, so I wouldn't feel comfortable trying to teach you. So I am going to be showing you how to install these mods. However, if you have any issues at all, go check out my Hollow Knight modding tutorial. In that video, I go much more in depth, and if you have any issues, there's going to be troubleshooting advice there. But just for the sake of saving time, I'm not going to be going over that in depth in this video. So let's get started with HKMP. So I'm going to be following Garo Uni's guide. I'll link to it in the description. This is a very thorough guide on installing and using HKMP. So let's start out by installing the mod. So first off, make sure you have the right version of the game. It has to be current patch. Unless you've done something to prevent the game from updating, this should be what you have, but you can open up the main menu and just check the numbers to make sure you have the right one. Next, we're going to be following these steps. These are just the basic steps to install mods in general. Close the game, open up Scarab mod installer. There's going to be a link to it in the description. And again, I'm not going to be going super in depth on this because I've already got a whole video covering Scarab and how to use it successfully. But we're going to want to go into this bar to search for HKMP. All we want to do is click install, and odds are you're going to want to try connecting to the public servers first. So you'll also want to grab HKMP pouch. Now you see all these other HKMP mods. If you install everything, you're going to have compatibility issues with the server. So you want to make sure you have the right mods installed and only those mods. HKMP pouch does allow you to have additional client-side HKMP mods. However, some of these will not be compatible with the server. An example of an HKMP pouch client-side mod that you could use is Ghost Hunter or Emote Wheel. Ghost Hunter, by the way, is the mod that allows you to see the positions of other players' enemies. Once you've installed HKMP, it's time to open the game and join a server. If you go to this document, you'll find there's a list of public servers, and on that list, it includes the required add-ons. So keep in mind, because we have HKMP Pouch installed right now, we could not connect to the HKMP tag server. We would have to first uninstall HKMP Pouch and then install HKMP tag. We would also need to install any other client-side Pouch add-ons, such as Ghost Hunter. When you open up the game, you should see in the top left corner, it should list HKMP and HKMP Pouch. The next thing you'll want to do is just open up any save file you'd like. Once you've got the game open, you can pause the game. In the top right, you can set your username first, and then you want to type in the public server IP. In this case, it's hkmp.org. However, in the future, that might be changed. The port is also 26950. You can see that the port can potentially change which server you're connecting to. So if you want the PvP server, 26950. However, if you want co-op PvP off, you'd want to go to 26951. Once that's done, simply hit connect, and you will have connected. If it tells you invalid add-ons or you get any other errors, make sure to check your mods in the top left so that you don't have anything that's incompatible. So what if you want to host your own server? This is where it actually starts to get a bit more complicated. Your two options for hosting a server are either to port forward, which is a bit more advanced to do, and you're going to need to look up a guide for how to do it based off the router that you have, or it's to use software such as Zero Tier or Tailscale or Hamachi. GaroUni's guide has instructions on how to do these processes. I'm not going to get into it because it does get pretty advanced. So my suggestion is that if you're not too confident in being able to set up the server by following these instructions, you should probably just join a public server. You won't get the same freedom in being able to set up different add-ons for yourself, but you'll still get 99% of the HKMP experience with very little headache in comparison. So this is the part of GaroUni's guide that covers using skins in HKMP. Now this process can get a little bit complicated, so what I recommend doing is simply downloading a skin pack and making sure that all the other players have the same set of skins as you do. So first things first, go to your Hollow Knight directory. Easiest way to do this is if you're on Steam, right-click it, go to Manage, then go Browse Local Files. You'll be sent to this window where you go into Hollow Knight Data, Managed, Mods, HKMP, Skins. Now, if you have a pack of skins, all you have to do is drag and drop all of them into this folder. Now, the reason why this gets a bit complicated is because if you go into these folders, you'll see that they have an ID text file. That ID text file contains a number. That's the number you're going to want to enter in HKMP so that everyone else can see that skin. Now, if someone else has a different skin than you that has the same ID number, when you enter that ID number, they're going to see a different skin on their screen. That's why you want to make sure that everyone has the same skins associated with the same ID numbers. And like I said, the easiest way to do that is just by downloading the same skin pack. Now, when you restart the game, it might take a while to load these skins. Just keep that in mind. And you'll see that if you connect to a server, make sure you connect to a server before applying a skin, and you type in 1, you will turn into the Aether Phase skin, because that's the skin associated with ID 1. As long as the other players have the same skin set to the same ID number, they will also see you as that skin. The last things you might want to check out in GaroUni's guide are common questions and issues. That's if you need to troubleshoot anything, and also chat and commands, because there are commands that you can enter into chat, mainly if you have administrator privileges on the server. Okay, so next up, we're going to be looking at ItemSync. Multiworld is currently still in development for current patch. However, ItemSync does offer a kind of similar experience, so I'm going to be talking about that. First thing is open up Scarab and install ItemSync. Just like with Randomizer, I'd also recommend adding in a map mod if you're not super experienced with Hollow Knight randomizers. The map mod is now called Rando Map Mod, so you might want to consider installing this as well. And these are client-side mods, so they're not going to affect other players in the ItemSync server. Lastly, you may want to consider adding debug mod as well, just in case you run into any technical issues that you need to fix with no clipping or any other debug mod features. Once you're done with that, you can open up the game and begin to follow these steps in the ItemSync documentation. So first things first, we're going to have one player who's playing the ItemSync go into and select randomizer settings. So the players are probably going to have to agree on what kind of settings they want to play with, what kind of difficulty level they want for the game. If you just kind of want to change the basic stuff, you can toggle through the settings by clicking on these. Otherwise, you can go into more advanced settings by going into more randomizer settings in the bottom left. Once you have settings that you want to communicate to everyone else, go into more randomizer settings in the bottom left, go into manage settings profiles, and then hit refresh code. Take this code and highlight all of it, then hit Control+C to copy it. You're going to want to paste this code to the other players who are going to join you. Other players need to then go into the same menu, paste the code here, just like this, and then hit apply code to menu. This will make sure that all players have the same settings for the randomizer. Once you've got to this point, simply click begin randomization, and what you should see is that all players should have the same hash. So these words represent the randomization. So all other players should see maggot, pale lurker, mistake, and heavy fool. If you don't have the same hash, make sure that all players have the same seed in the bottom right. Otherwise, it might be an issue of settings, or it could be that some players have connections enabled while other players don't. In this case, the person who made the code has no connections, so no one else should have any connections either. But once you get to this point and everyone has the same hash, click proceed, then go to ItemSync. Now, in the ItemSync documentation, there is a public server listed. If you don't have this automatically entered by default, simply copy and paste it here, and then click Connect. You're going to want to enter a nickname, and all the players should enter in the same room. So if I create the room God Gamer, anyone else who joins the God Gamer room is going to be a part of the ItemSync game that we're playing. So once you hit ready, you're going to see a list of the other players in the top right as they enter the room. Now, the important thing is that you only want to start ItemSync once all the other players are in the room and ready. So once all the other players are ready, one player will click Start ItemSync. This will allow all the other players to join the game. Now, if you install debug mod, you can get rid of it by hitting F1. And now at this point, you're going to have a randomized world, assuming you randomized things in the settings. And whenever you pick up items, such as this Georock, every other player in the room is going to get it. Now, Multiworld is going to work in roughly the same way. However, once it releases, you may want to check the documentation while you install it, because, for example, some parts of the process might be slightly different, and there will probably be a different server for you to connect to. Other than that, though, the process should be mostly the same. One thing that's kind of smart to do once you open up an ItemSync world, by the way, is to just hit Set Start and then Warp. This just warps you back to the starting spot, but one thing you'll notice is that it saves the game. If for some reason you encounter a crash before your game saves, you won't be able to rejoin the room. So it's important to save the game as soon as it starts. That way, if your game crashes, you can just go back to the save screen and load the save back up, and you'll automatically re-enter the ItemSync lobby. And of course, if you're playing ItemSync, you can also join an HKMP server as well. It's just more fun to be able to see the other players, in my opinion. But that kind of depends on how complicated you want things to be and whether you're willing to work through any technical issues that players might have. So one more thing I want to go over is how to install a Hollow Knight mod pack. First things first, make sure you have a current patch version of Hollow Knight. So if you've down patched, make sure to go into properties, and betas, and just make sure it's set to none so that the game updates. So the game should be closed while you go through this process or anything involving modding with Hollow Knight, but go to your Hollow Knight directory by going to Browse Local Files. Then you go into Hollow Knight Data and Managed. Now, if the mod pack is set up properly, this should be where you throw the files. However, in some cases, a mod pack is just going to include mods. So you're going to want to rename your old mods folder just to back it up. And then you can create a new mods folder for you to place the mods inside. The reason why we've changed the name of the mod folder is so that the game doesn't know that it exists. So it won't try to load any of the mods in this folder. However, if we want to restore these mods, we can easily do so by just renaming it back to what it was before. So once you're at this point, you can simply open up the mod pack. For example, this is an infection tag mod pack that I made a long time ago, and you'd simply drag all of these files into the managed folder. Now, it may need to overwrite some of these files. Just click Replace the Files. However, none of the mods should be overwritten because there shouldn't be any mods installed when you drag the files in. Now, if you go into Scarab after the fact and start installing extra mods, it defeats the purpose of the mod pack, because the point of the mod pack is to make sure that everyone has the exact same mods installed, nothing more, nothing less. So don't install anything extra or don't remove any of the mods that were installed. Once you have these mods placed in this folder, the mod pack should be installed and functional. If you really want to double check, you can open up the game and go look at the top left to make sure that all the mods have loaded. If I organize any multiplayer games in the future, then you're probably going to be working with one of these mod packs. So that is how you install it. But I hope you all enjoyed the video and found it helpful. If you're having any problems, make sure to thoroughly read the documentation for the mod that you're working with. If you're still having issues, there is the support channel in the Hollow Knight modding Discord. Just make sure to thoroughly explain your problem so that you don't waste anyone's time having them ask you to clarify things. But yeah, that's it for this video. Thanks so much to all the people who have worked to create this documentation, and of course, the mods themselves. Thanks so much to all the modders who do awesome work for the community. I really, really appreciate it. That is all. Hope you have fun playing Hollow Knight multiplayer and that you have a wonderful day. Peace.